Hello, before we get started, let us first introduce ourselves. My name is Claire Gilroy-Scott and I'm a partner in the employment team at Goodman Derrick.
And I'm Emily Kersey and I'm a solicitor in the employment team at Goodman Derrick.
We've recently presented a number of workshops covering common HR horrors faced by HR teams. This is the first session that we did in that workshop, and it covers defeated in disciplining Declan by his dubious declaration of depression. I think it's a sure bet that at least some of you have been faced with the situation where you invite an employee to a disciplinary meeting, only to then receive a sick note signing them off work for a few weeks with a medical condition that you knew nothing about. And this generally is covering stress or anxiety or depression. We're going to look at how you might handle this.
Well, let's imagine the following. Declan, your long-serving accounts manager, is accused of fiddling the books. The evidence against him is overwhelming and you have, in line with the ACAS code, written to him inviting him to a meeting and sent him copies of the evidence. A few days before the disciplinary meeting is scheduled, you receive a sick note from Declan. He has been signed off work for 2 weeks, citing depression and stress. So, do you have to postpone the disciplinary meeting?
You don't necessarily have to postpone the meeting. Here you've got two conflicting priorities. One is the need to conclude your disciplinary process within a reasonable time, and you also have an obligation to look after the welfare of Declan as your employee. We would recommend that you first write to Declan to actually check whether he is okay to attend the meeting. Even though he is unfit to work, this does not necessarily mean that he is unfit to engage in your process.
However, if Declan is not willing to attend, it is best to postpone the meeting until after his sick note expires. After all, this is only a 2-week delay. But what often seems to happen is that repeated sick notes are received and you keep postponing the disciplinary meeting. Many employees think that this is a smart strategy to avoid the meeting altogether, but it can't go on indefinitely. Eventually, they will have to come back to work and face the music.
So, how can you try and move the disciplinary process along? We'd suggest starting with encouraging Declan to attend the meeting. Often it's better to try and resolve the stressful situation rather than let it fester. The DWP's Health and Work Handbook states,
in these circumstances, it is likely that the effect of an unresolved dispute on the employee's mental health may be greater if the proceedings are postponed. An employee may be unfit for work but fit to engage with the management process.
And this is actually a useful piece of guidance to quote in correspondence with employees in these circumstances. You can, of course, ask the employee to submit to a medical examination, and we'd suggest an occupational health specialist who is well versed in these types of issues. You may even have a contractual right to demand that your employee submit to such an examination, and having this does tend to make such a request easier. The downside to this route is that if the medical practitioner concludes Declan, your employee, is unfit to attend, then you are stuck with that decision.
Think creatively about alternatives to a meeting. Is Derek willing to provide written representations instead of attending a meeting in person? Is it just that Declan doesn't want to attend the workplace, in which case a meeting off-site at a neutral venue might be a solution? Try to get to the bottom of the issue and see whether a practical solution can be found. Now finally, you can consider making a decision in Declan's absence. However, this would be a last resort because of the risks attached. In particular, there are arguments that a fair disciplinary process has not been carried out, Declan has not had the chance to defend himself or state his case, and that could lead to employment law claims. Making a decision in Declan's absence would only really be appropriate if you had exhausted all other avenues and there was a real need to conclude the disciplinary process. Certainly you should seek legal advice before going down this route.
So let's think now of potential legal claims that could be brought by Declan. We'll look at possible disability discrimination first, and the question is, could Declan be considered disabled for the purposes of employment law? A disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on the employee's ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. Certainly depression can be a mental impairment, and in Declan's case it seems more than trivial as he has been signed off sick for 2 weeks. The main question here will be whether it is long-term, i.e. likely to last over 12 months. This is perhaps questionable on the facts known, but you will need to go back and check the reasons for previous absences. Further medical advice is likely to be needed here, to be able to determine this properly. If Declan is disabled, you will need to ensure that he is not discriminated against because of his disability through your process. Further, you have a duty to make reasonable adjustments, and this includes to your disciplinary process. This could include, for example, allowing him to be accompanied by a friend or a family member at any disciplinary meeting, and also meeting him at a neutral venue where he feels more comfortable.
Constructive unfair dismissal is another potential claim to be aware of. So if you place undue pressure on Declan to attend the disciplinary meeting, he might try to claim constructive dismissal, namely that your unreasonable behaviour has caused a fundamental breakdown in the employment relationship which entitles him to resign. However, this claim would only be available if Declan has been employed for 2 or more years, which he has on these facts.
There's also a claim for unfair dismissal if you were to take a decision in his absence to end his employment. Declan is likely to argue that it was procedurally unfair and he wasn't able to state his case. This is where having a really good paper trail about your efforts to have a meeting with Declan will be essential. There is also a potential personal injury claim, depending on the circumstances. He may try to argue that the work-related stress has caused him a personal injury. To successfully claim this, Declan would firstly have to show that you have breached your duty of care to him by arguing something along the lines of your failure to protect his health, safety and welfare at work. And also, he would need to show that this was the cause of his illness. Secondly, it must have been reasonably foreseeable that your breach of duty would result in the injury suffered. Now, if the reason for Declan's stress is solely the fact that you have called a disciplinary meeting, his claim is extremely likely to fail, as you are perfectly entitled to pursue such a process, providing, of course, that it is conducted reasonably and fairly. That's the end of our session considering defeated in disciplining Declan by his dubious declaration of depression. Please do check out our other podcasts on HR horrors.
Next, we'll be looking at putting up with pregnant Paula and her poor performance.
Finally, please do link in with us and follow us on Twitter @EmplawHeroes. Bye for now.